Paul Henreid, who played Victor Laszlo, didn't like the role either. He had just starred in a big movie with Bette Davis, and now he felt like he was being pushed aside. He even called the script terrible and thought his character's entrance, wearing a cream-colored suit, didn't make sense for someone escaping a concentration camp. Other actors weren't too excited either. S.Z. Sakal, who played Carl the waiter, said no at first, and only agreed when they promised him several weeks of work. Claude Rains, who played Captain Renault, wasn't even the first pick for the role. They had asked Otto Preminger, but he turned it down. Even though so many actors were unsure or unhappy at first, they all ended up creating characters that are loved to this day. It's amazing how things turned out, despite how bumpy the process was. Filming Casablanca was just as chaotic. The script wasn't finished when they started shooting in May 1942. Writers were constantly making changes, and the actors would get their lines at the last minute, sometimes written on scraps of paper. Ingrid Bergman once asked the director, Michael Curtiz, whether Ilsa loved Rick or Laszlo. His answer? Play it in between. Even the ending wasn't decided until near the end of filming. This caused confusion, but it also added mystery to the story, especially to Ilsa's character. The chaos didn't stop after filming. Bogart had to come back later to record the famous line, "Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship." That line wasn't even in the script during filming, but it became one of the most memorable parts of the movie. For Bergman, things were frustrating in a different way. She didn't have a clear idea of Ilsa's character because the script kept changing. This uncertainty annoyed her since she was used to having everything planned out. But that confusion worked in her favor. It gave her performance a sense of mystery. Even she didn't know where Ilsa's heart truly lay, and that made the audience wonder, too. In a 1974 interview, she admitted, "I made so many films which were more important, but the only one people ever want to talk about is that one with Bogart." Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman gave unforgettable performances in Casablanca. Their romance in the movie became the gold standard for love stories on screen. For Bogart, this was a big change. He was 42 and used to playing hard, cynical characters. This was his first romantic lead. He made Rick complex, tough but kind, broken but noble. Lines like, "Here's looking at you, kid," and "We'll always have Paris," became so famous that people still quote them today. His performance earned him his first Oscar nomination. Bergman, only 27 at the time, gave Ilsa depth and grace. With just a look or a small gesture, she showed the pain of a woman caught between love and duty. The chemistry between Bogart and Bergman was so believable that people thought they might be in love off-screen. Rumors of an affair grew during filming, especially because Bogart's wife, Mayo Methot, was known for being jealous and sometimes stormed onto the set accusing him of cheating. Bergman, already married to Petter Lindström, had a history of affairs, which added to the gossip. But people who worked on the movie said the rumors weren't true. Director Michael Curtiz and even Bogart's son later said there was no romance between the two actors. They were just professionals. Still, the rumors added to the movie's mystique, making the love story seem even more real. Bergman herself later said, "I kissed him, but I never knew him." This quote summed up their on-screen connection but off-screen distance. She made the comment in 1974, years after Bogart had passed away, and explained that people only ever wanted to ask her about Casablanca, even though she had starred in many other important films. The quote also showed how acting can create a sense of intimacy that doesn't reflect real life. Bogart and Bergman barely spoke between takes, with Bogart often avoiding her by playing chess or keeping to himself. Some think his behavior was because of his troubled marriage, while others believe he was trying to keep the tension between their characters alive. Their emotional distance behind the scenes added an authentic, bittersweet quality to Rick and Ilsa's story. When Casablanca came out on November 26, 1942, no one could have guessed how big it would become. It was rushed into theaters to tie in with the Allied invasion of North Africa, but the movie became so much more. People loved it. It made $3.7 million in its first run, which was a lot back then, especially since tickets only cost 27 cents. Later, in 1944, the movie won 3 Oscars: Best Picture, Best Director for Michael Curtis, and Best Adapted Screenplay. For Humphrey Bogart, the film changed everything. Before this, he was mostly known for playing gangsters, but Casablanca turned him into a romantic hero and one of the most popular actors in Hollywood. His salary shot up from $2,750 a week in 1942 to over $460,000 a year by 1946. He became the highest-paid actor in the world. For Ingrid Bergman, the movie made her an even bigger star. Suddenly, every studio wanted her in their films. Her pay doubled overnight, and she got to choose which roles she wanted. That kind of control was rare, especially for women at the time. After Casablanca made Humphrey Bogart a star in 1942, his life changed in unexpected ways. The movie made him a Hollywood legend, but Bogart wasn't happy with how the studios controlled everything. In 1944, he began fighting for more freedom. He wanted better roles and more say in his movies. This led to a big argument with Warner Brothers boss Jack Warner. On April 17, 1945, Bogart threatened to quit if things didn't change. A month later, he signed a new contract. This gave him the rare power to approve scripts and even start his own company. Between 1943 and 1950, Bogart starred in many movies. Some of his most famous were The Big Sleep and Dark Passage, but he thought his best role was in The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. The movie was praised, but it didn't make enough money. This upset Bogart because he wanted people to see him as more than just a tough guy. During this time, Bogart fell in love with sailing. In 1945, he bought a yacht called Santana. Sailing became his favorite escape. He spent almost every weekend on the water. In 1946, a storm almost sank his boat near Catalina Island. Bogart barely made it out alive. This close call made him think about what mattered in life. It also pushed him to get involved in politics. In 1945, Bogart married Lauren Bacall. They met while filming To Have and Have Not. Bogart was 44 and Bacall was just 19. He was still married to his third wife, but he couldn't ignore his feelings. During filming, he wrote her love letters. One said, "I never thought I could love again." Bogart divorced his wife in May 1945 and married Bacall just days later. Their wedding was small, with only close friends. Bogart was nervous and had a few drinks before the ceremony. Bacall looked stunning in a simple beige suit. The studio didn't like their marriage. Warner Brothers spread rumors and tried to keep them apart. But Bogart and Bacall stayed strong. They made 3 more movies together, and their chemistry was unforgettable. People loved them both on and off screen. They had 2 children and stayed together until Bogart's death in 1957. In 1948, Bogart did something bold. He started his own company, Santana Productions, named after his yacht. He wanted control over his movies. The first film was Knock on Any Door. It made money, but his second movie, In a Lonely Place, became a classic. Bogart played a troubled writer, and it was one of his best performances. Running a production company wasn't easy. Bogart struggled to get funding. Santana made 7 films, but most didn't make much money. In 1954, Bogart had to shut it down. He sold the company's assets, but stayed proud of what he had tried to do. His work inspired other actors to fight for more control over their careers. In 1951, Bogart starred in The African Queen. The movie was filmed in the jungle and was tough on everyone. The heat, disease, and dangerous animals made it hard to shoot. Bogart joked that whiskey kept him and the director healthy. The movie was a big success and earned Bogart an Oscar. When he won, he said, "It's nicer to be here than in the jungle." It was a proud moment for him, especially at 52 years old. Bogart was also passionate about politics. In 1947, he stood up against a government group called HUAC. They were investigating communists in Hollywood. Bogart joined other stars to protest. He flew to Washington, D.C. with Lauren Bacall and others to support free speech. But there was backlash. People called for boycotts of his movies, and the studio pressured him to back down. Bogart eventually said he wasn't a communist, but he still helped blacklisted writers in secret. Meanwhile, in 1949, Ingrid Bergman's life changed completely. She was married to a Swedish dentist, Peter Lindström, and had a daughter. Then, while filming Stromboli in Italy, she fell in love with the director, Roberto Rossellini. He was also married at the time. Their love became very serious, very quickly. By April 1949, Ingrid was pregnant with his child. When the public found out she was pregnant, there was an uproar. Fans were shocked because they saw her as pure and virtuous, like the characters she played in films like Casablanca. Things got even worse when people learned she had left her 12-year-old daughter, Pia, in the U.S. with her estranged husband. In February 1950, Ingrid gave birth to her son, Renato, just days before Stromboli premiered in the U.S. Instead of celebrating, people were outraged. Religious groups called for boycotts of her movies. Even theaters stopped showing her old films. People felt she had betrayed them. The scandal reached the U.S. Senate. A senator named Edwin C. Johnson said Ingrid was a powerful influence for evil. He called her and Roberto Rossellini immoral and even compared her to other actresses he saw as bad influences. He went so far as to propose a law that would force actors to get a special license to work. If they behaved badly, the government could take it away. Ingrid's fans turned against her. She received hateful letters calling her a common adulteress and saying she had disgraced her family. Some letters told her to kill herself. She was banned from TV shows, and her movies were boycotted in cities across the country. It became impossible for her to continue her career in Hollywood. Feeling trapped, Ingrid left the U.S. and went to Europe. She held a press conference in Rome to announce her plans. She said the constant rumors and attacks had forced her to leave. Soon after, she divorced her husband and married Roberto Rossellini. They had 3 children together, Renato and twin daughters, Isabella and Isotta. Even though Hollywood rejected her, Ingrid kept acting in Europe. Between 1950 and 1957, she made 5 movies with Rossellini. These films were very different from her Hollywood work. They were raw and emotional, like Stromboli, where she played a refugee struggling to survive on a volcanic island. Her movie, Europa 51, won her a big award in Italy. Another film, Journey to Italy, was not a success at first, but later it became a classic that inspired many famous directors. During this time, Ingrid also worked with other directors. In 1956, she starred in a light French comedy called Elena and Her Men. It was one of the few times Rossellini allowed her to act for someone else while they were married. Life wasn't easy for Ingrid during these years, but she stayed strong and kept working. Ingrid Bergman made a big return to Hollywood in 1956. Her comeback started with the movie Anastasia. In this film, she played a woman who might be the lost Grand Duchess Anastasia Romanov. The role was perfect for her. She showed she could be both strong and vulnerable. When the movie premiered in December 1956, people loved it. Critics and audiences praised her performance, and the film was a big success. In March 1957, Bergman won her second Oscar for her role in Anastasia. This was a huge moment. It had been 14 years since her first Oscar nomination for Whom the Bell Tolls, but she was still unsure how people felt about her. She didn't even attend the ceremony. Instead, Cary Grant accepted the award for her. After that, her career took off again. In 1958, she acted with Cary Grant in Indiscreet. It was another hit. It shows how fragile life is, but also reminds us of the lasting power of great art. His toughness and spirit, both on and off screen, will never be forgotten.